And here we go. All right, welcome to the Parsha class, Parshat Bamidbar, 5785. Quite a bit to do today. This is the beginning of a new sefer, a new book. The story part of the Torah continues. Now that we have the Mishkan built, we have all the details of how it works, why it works, and what it's supposed to do, which is to create a sense of holiness for the Shekhinah to rest amongst the Jewish people. Now that we have all of that, now the Jews are about to set sail, as it were, through the Midbar, through the wilderness, and only one thing remains before they actually start going, and that's we have to get some numbers, as the book is called the Book of Numbers, because there are going to be several censuses taken of the Jewish people, and that starts in this week's parsha, and it can be challenging to learn a parsha like this. There are a lot of there's a lot to say. There are a lot of numbers, obviously, and a lot of depth. Only if you know how to sort of dig a little deeper, and our sages know how to do that, and hopefully we'll be able to share some of those ideas today. Let's start with our source sheet that was sent out by email earlier yesterday, I believe. Not bad for my typically that's not how it goes. Usually I send it out a few minutes before. All right, so we had a couple of hours to look it over. All right, so chapter 1, verse 1, the very beginning of the book from which it gets its name. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Bamidbar Sinai, as Hashem spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai, Be'ohel Moed, in the tent of meeting, Be'echad L'chodesh Hasheni, in the first of the second month, Nisan being the first, so this is ER, the month we just finished in our calendar, and Bashana Hashenit in the second year. So this is 1 year after the first the first Pesach, when the Jewish people left Mitzrayim. Remember, 49 days later they received the Torah at Har Sinai, and now this is a good 300 days later or so at the start of the month, almost a year later from receiving the Torah. This is the beginning of ER. The Torah was received in the beginning of Sivan. So there you go. Let's say Tam Eretz Mitzrayim Limor. So this is the second year after they left Mitzrayim, and he said to them. So one question that a lot of the commentaries ask, and it's worth asking, is why does it say Bamidbar Sinai, that Hashem spoke to Moshe at Midbar Sinai in this Ol Moed? Should be pretty clear at this point where they are. They're not in Israel yet, that's for sure. And if we're starting this book right after we finish the previous book, they were in Sinai there. Why would we think anything otherwise? In other words, this verse seems to be stressing the fact that it's given Bamidbar in the wilderness, and there has to be a reason. And there are a number of reasons given, the most famous of which, and I shared this in my weekly video earlier this week, but this comes from the Baal HaTurim, who points out Le'el Minei Ktiv Ala Mitzvot, that those are mitzvot Samech Le Bamidbar, and here we're saying that this happened, that these laws were taught in this wilderness in the Midbar, and the book gets its name from this Midbar. This seems kind of important. Why? What's the importance? Lomar im Eda in. If im ein adam meshiv atzmo k'midbar, if a person does not make oneself into a midbar, into a wilderness, enu yachol leda Torah mitzvot, they will never be able to really learn Torah and mitzvot. What does that mean? How do you make yourself into a midbar? Says the Baal HaTurim. Basically, the implication being that you have to humble yourself the level of a midbar. But there might be more to it, and that's where we come to the Ketav Sofer. Interestingly enough, in the next comment, we'll see from the Chatam Sofer, the Ketav Sofer's father, so kind of going in reverse order here, It's not to in any way disrespect. We're just going in chronological order of the verses. So the Ktav Sofer, writing about 150 years ago, writes on this verse that there's a Midrash Rabbah, there's a Midrashic teaching that Begimel Devarim Nitla HaTorah. Torah was given with three things, with three items, three mediums through which Torah was given. B'mayim, ba'esh, b'midbar. And that's why it says midbar here, because one of the ways that the Torah was acquired by the Jewish people was through this midbar, and through mayim, through water, and through fire. So water, fire, wilderness. Those three things all have something to do with the acquisition of Torah. And that's what the Midrash, that's how the Midrash kind of concludes there. It doesn't say much about it, but we need to understand why that's true. How that's true. What does that even mean? So Nira, so says the Ktav Sofer now, Nira lefarish kavanatam shekol echad mora al davar acher. Each one of these three items, mediums, they all sort of point to different directions. Nitna b'mayim, the Torah was given with water. What does that mean? So lahorot al she'amru chazal, as the rabbis teach us in Tanchuma on Pashat Vayakel, lama nimshulu divrei Torah lamayim. The words of Torah are compared to water. Ma mayim yordim b'makom gavoa lamakom namuch. Kach divrei Torah lemenichim mi shedato gavoa alav v'holchim lemi shedato shefala. So the Torah starts at a high level and can resonate, can sort of drop down to the lower level. It runs down. In other words, if you really want to acquire Torah, what should be? Where should you be? Should you be standing on the high ground, or should you be on the low ground? So the Torah is going to come down to eventually to where? To the low ground. So it's worthwhile to humble yourself, to make yourself not think you're so great and wonderful. Because if you think you're so great and wonderful, you'll never want to learn new things. People who lack humility never really are able to see other perspectives. They don't think those perspectives are worthwhile. Why should I think like somebody else? I'm greater than them, right? So that's not the way to. I think the microphone's getting weird. All right, I see what's going on here. I see what's happening here. 1 second. See if you guys can still hear me. Oh, no, it's good. All right, that's weird. All right, so in other words, so the water is symbolic of the humility that a person needs for Torah. What about fire? Right, so Torah is given through fire. What does that mean? So we have points out, by the way, that Har Sinai was the lowest of all the mountains. Like the lower mountain was the one that gave the Torah. Again, teaching this humility. So only the humble people can really acquire Torah properly. And that's what he says, why it says that the Torah was given through water. What does it mean that it was given through fire? Torah is compared to fire. What does that mean? Ki ner mitzvah v'Torah or. That the candle is mitzvah and Torah is or. In other words, a lot of people want to do mitzvot, and it's a beautiful thing to do the mitzvot. But mitzvot without Torah is like a candle without a flame. It's pretty, but it's pointless. It's not doing anything. A candle without a flame isn't heating anything. It isn't enlightening anything. You have to learn if you want to perform the mitzvot correctly. I know a lot of people who say they keep kosher, who say they keep Shabbat, but for whatever reason, probably the Yetzer Hara, they refuse to learn books that are or go to lectures where they learn the details of how to do these things. And then they're surprised that they haven't been keeping kosher their whole lives. They thought they were, but they didn't check their vegetables for bugs because they never learned how to, as if it's some sort of big mystery that only mishkichim know how to do. Or they wanted to keep Shabbat, but they never read a book on Shabbat, so they don't know. Can I use an elevator? Does it have to be a Shabbat elevator? Is there a difference? What's the deal with driving? How early can I start Shabbat? How late do I have to keep Shabbat? All of these things are details that you can learn. They're readily available. But if you don't learn them, if you don't have the Torah, then the mitzvah is lacking. And that's why Torah is compared to Aish, because that Torah, that learning of how to do things, that's what enlightens, that's what makes that mitzvah so much more powerful. Kiner mitzvah Torah, right. And so on the next topic, right? So back to our third thing. So it's water because water flows down, and that's humility. It's fire because it enlightens how to do mitzvot, sets the stage for that. And then our next thing to figure out is, in what way is Torah like a midbar? So he quotes here, yeah. Okay, he's still talking about Aish. Is that Aish? Okay, Aval Misha Inaloma. Hold on a second. Where is it? I think I skipped the part where he explains why it's considered a midbar. How ironic. Hold on. I have the source here. Interesting. Why would I do that? I have done silly things before, I promise you. Yeah, I skipped the main part that I was trying to get to. Mashakov nitlo b'midbar yesh lomar. I'll try to add that later into the source sheet for our purposes. Man. The Torah was given in the midbar to the people who ate man, right? The manna, the heavenly bread from Shemayim, this miraculous bread that fell, fully formed, fully cooked. Mutarod rak nafsham. It's the only thing it did was it gave them nutrition. In other words, right? Kida Amra, as it says in Pirkei Avot, kach darka pat bebelach tochal. You're supposed to eat bread with salt. In other words, part of the understanding of how to actually acquire real Torah is to not focus your life on the unnecessary things, on things that may or may not be enjoyable, but they're not the reason. They're not the Actually, they're luxuries, more or less. You have to be able to be more basic. And what is more basic than man? Man didn't have to be cooked. Man was not salted, sugared, covered in whipped cream or anything. It was just man. And if you can subsist on just man, as the Jews did in the desert, so what that means is that's all you need. You're eating only what you need. You're not looking for extravagances. You're not looking for more, and that's what it means for the Torah to be given through the midbar. And that's why it's such a stress here that it was given in the midbar, because in the midbar is where we learned this lesson of focusing on the essentials only. So again, humility, learning for performance. So humility, performance, and this third thing, this idea of staying away from luxuries and focusing on the basics, all of those are the ways that we acquire Torah more fully and enjoy our lives more, which is what the purpose of Torah is. We're going to skip quite a few verses, and then the Torah starts with the counting. There's this many people in this tribe, this many people in that tribe, etc. And it comes up to about 603,550, if I'm not mistaken. That's the total of this first counting, almost a little more than 600,000 people. And that's where we are now left with a count amongst the tribes being counted. Obviously, all 12 tribes are counted. One of them is Naftali. Now, what you don't know, what I don't have in the source sheet, but it's worth pointing out that in all of the other cases, and the commentary you're going to see, the Hatam Sofer's commentary in Torah Moshe, he points out that in all of the other tribes it says Libnei Yisachar, Libnei Dan. It says to the tribe. Li means to in front of a word. So that's the prefix lamed, and it indicates that this is what we're counting. We're counting this thing. So what's interesting here is if you look at chapter 1, verse 42, that's Aleph Mem Bet. It says, B'nei Naftali toldotam lemishpachotam leveit avotam b'mispar shemot miben 20 shana v'mala kol yitzei tzava pekudehem lemata Naftali shlosha chamishim elef v'arba me'ot. So, and this is the same phraseology as all the other tribes, except for one little difference, as we pointed out. It says the sons of Naftali, according to their generations, according to their number, according to their household, the names of the numbers of the names from 20 years old and up, all of them that are able to be soldiers and go out to war. Their numbers for the tribe of Naftali, the total is 53,400. That's the number. Like I said before, that first word there, B'nai Naftali, for all of the other tribes was Li B'nai Yisachar, Lamed before this word, right? So to the tribe. And even in the Safari's translation, they have of in brackets. For the other tribes, they don't have to have it in brackets. It's written of or for the Lamed there. So the question we have to ask, and Baruch Hashem, we have other great commentaries who ask, and of course, they didn't have computers back then. This is a 250. So, my gosh, it's a very sensitive wire. 1 second. Okay, good. They didn't have computers back then, so it's really astounding that they could notice these things. You have to read it very, very closely to notice that it has a lamed with the other 11 tribes, and this 12th tribe does not have a lamed. And that's one of the important points, is that this is the 12th tribe that's being counted. B'nai Naftali, he says, B'chulan k'tiv livnei v'kan, B'nai, here it says B'nai, over there it says Libnei, Kevan sheyu nimanim b'achrona memele yedua elu, shenisharo. Kulam B'nai Naftali Hema. What you could have done is leave this tribe out altogether. Since we already counted 11 tribes, and we know what each of their totals is, and eventually we're going to get to the total, which I already told you is 603,350, I think, 550. You can do the math and subtract that number minus those other 11 tribes and figure out what Naftali is. So Naftali could have been left out altogether. But says the Chatam Sofer, he says, "V'lo hayu tzrichim lomar kamo beruven elu hanitanim livnei Ruvain hema v'shar shvatim." The Torah, the Hashem in his Torah does not want for any of the tribes to be missing, and so each one of these. Each one. Oh, you know what? I'm again making a mistake. I'm sending you to the wrong part here in Torah Moshe. He quotes from his Rebbe that this answer of if you would subtract, you don't need to count. You don't need to tell me what the number is of Naftali. The total number of all the Jews minus the other 11 tribes would give us what Naftali is, and so this would be unnecessary. But the rabbis tell us that it wasn't just counting that happened to these people. It wasn't like just a one, two, three, four. We're just counting people. Each one of these people individually got a chance to come up to Moshe Rabbeinu, say Shalom Aleichem. Moshe got to look in their eyes and tell them what's going on with them, what they need to work on, how wonderful and how beloved each one is. Imagine such a bracha. People go to Hasidim go to Rebbes for a bracha. Even sometimes non-Hasidim do this to get like a touch of holiness. Imagine Moshe Rabbeinu, what kind of great bracha it would be to get to come up to him and have that same sort of shalom aleichem. It's a beautiful thing. It's one of the reasons to sort of like it's one of the ways that we enhance our belief in the Masorah, in this chain that leads all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu, is that he taught people, and then they taught people, and then they taught people, and our teachers today, some of them are also great enough that they can also look into your soul and tell you, what's doing and what can be improved, etc. It's an amazing, beautiful thing. Okay, all right. Um, let's skip ahead a little bit. Let's forge ahead to chapter 2, verse 2. So we've already counted the Jewish people, and now we're going to talk about how they're supposed to be assembled, how they're supposed to be sort of organized in their campground, in the camp. Who's going to be on the west, on the east, and the north, south, and there's obviously those 4 directions and 12 tribes. So you would expect for them to be 3 tribes. That's 12 divided by 4. You're welcome. There should be 3 tribes on each of these 4 sides, and it's supposed to be a very great thing. They're highly praised for being in these groups, as if it was a big deal that Hashem told them to go there, and so they went. So, oh my gosh, they're the greatest people in the world that they did this. So it's worth figuring out why that's such a great thing. Just a moment. Excuse me. All right. So the says Ish al diglo oto levet avotam yachnu b'nei Yisrael. So each man, each person, al diglo with his degel is usually a flag or a standard. But otot with the usual signs, levet avotam of their family. Yachnu b'nei Yisrael, and that's how they traveled. The whole b'nei Yisrael. Mineged savi b'ol moed yachanu, all around the Ohel Moed. So they traveled, and the Ohel Moed was in between them. Now, there's an argument, and we discussed this in previous years. There's an argument if they were, if they were like a sort of, as I described before, sort of in a square or rectangular configuration, moving towards Israel through the Midbar, or if they were in a line, a straight line, and the Ohel Moed was in between, as some commentaries say. Either way, it's not totally relevant to our discussion here. Our discussion here is more of that question I asked earlier, which is, what's the big deal that they listened to Hashem and they decided to, and they were encamped the way they were told to do? It's, I mean, it's not like they had other options. It's not like they were told, either you go to, the campground, or we'll give you a 5-star hotel, and everybody sacrificed the 5-star hotel to go to the campground. That's not what happened. So the Mayan Beit HaShoeva, Rav Shimon Schwab, explains Ve'ivor al pi divrei Rashi. He wants to explain this. And by the way, we're coming into this essay, just so you know, just to be completely upfront with you, we're coming into this essay about halfway through. So some of the other things he pointed out in his development of the question, not entirely relevant for our question right now, but he explains that there's a Rashi earlier in the Parsha. This is actually the first Rashi in this book, where Rashi says that Rashi shikatav metoch chivitatan lefanav mona otam kol shah. Hashem seems to be counting the Jewish people very often in this book, which is called Numbers, right, in English, and it's not so far from what the rabbis call it. Is definitely indicative of the fact that Hashem seems to think something about the Jewish people. The way Rashi understands it, and this it's pretty well understood by most rabbis, is that Hashem loves the Jewish people so much that he counts them very, very often. Just like if you had something that was precious to you, if it was money or Legos or whatever, some collectible that you have, right? So the more you love it, the more often you look at it, you count it, you make sure it's there. You don't just leave it to collect dust, right? You take hold of it, you look at it, right? So especially the comparison is to money. Money is counted quite often by people who love it, I guess. People who have it, I imagine. We're talking Shagam Khan Hayu Minyan Lerod Chiba Yitera Yisrael. This shows how much Hashem loves the Jewish people. Hainu Lefi Shetzava Kadosh Baruch Hu. And this command also shows how much the Jewish people deserve to be beloved. He says Shalavim Yitnu Savil Mishkan Ve'adata Ha'edat. So the Jewish people are, the Levim are should camp around the Mishkan. Umachan Yisrael yitrachek mesivotam ohel moed merachek shel tchum Shabbat kemush amar mineged savi be'ol moed yachanu. So Ayin Sham Rashi. So Rashi in chapter 2, verse 2 here says that the Jewish people had to make had to basically be at a distance. Mineged Saviv had to be at a distance from this Ohel Moed. So as precious as the Ohel Moed was to them, they were told that they had to sit farther away, to encamp further away from it. K'tiv Yas B'nei Yisrael K'chol Shetzivah Hashem et Moshe Ken Asu. And then later on, it's going to say that the Jewish people did as they were commanded. So that is worth a lot of praise. He says, Hine bevadai haita lekol echad misrael tshuka liyot samuch lemakom hashrat hashina. Every Jew would probably want, naturally desire, to be close to the place where the Shekhinah is. They would sort of like levitate toward, not levitate, but they would like sort of like be magnetized towards that. However, Tziva Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shiyachanu ish al diglo rechok me'il. They were told to be quite a distance, a third of a half a mile, 3/4 of a mile away from the Mishkan. They had to make room for the Levim to be immediately around the Mishkan. V'lo metzinu shitramu b'nei Yisrael al hitrach kotam. And you don't see that the Jewish people argued against Hashem with this sort of border that he put them, that they put around the thing that they want to be coming to. He says it's a mashal. He gives this can be compared to Lamaha Davar Doma. What's this comparable to? Le'echad shetziva l'salek et hayoshvim rishona mimkomam l'chvodam aved hakneset l'shiva me'acharona habima. If you've got a lot of shuls, the more important people sit sort of up front. It's like somebody coming into a shul and telling those people, move back, sit here for the rest of your lives. Don't sit up front where you've been honored, but sit in the back. Get in the back of the bus. That would be very disrespectful, and people might object to such a thing. So, but these people did not. These people did not. They were up close and personal with the Mishkan, and Hashem commanded them make room for the Levium. And what did the Jewish people do? Without becoming Karens, without asking to speak to the manager, without any kind of protest, boycott, or anything like that, they stepped back and let the Levium be next to the Mishkan, and they were a little bit further back. And they were okay with that. And that, says Rav Schwab, shows why Hashem loved the Jewish people so much. They deserved it. It wasn't just like, oh, they're Jews, so of course he's going to love them. No, the Jewish people behaved in a certain way, in a certain humble, really, way. And even though they wanted to be close to this holiness, they had the humility to sort of back off and listen to what Hashem really is telling them. It's not an easy thing to do, especially when it comes to religious matters. We all have in our probably in our experience a situation where you thought that your solution to a particular problem was the right solution. What I say is holier. Well, who are you to say such a thing? We've got years and years of scholarship and sages, etc., who've thought through the situation, and they know what's holier and what's correct much better than little pitzka me, So that's the idea, that kind of humility. He continues. He quotes an interesting Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. Says that there's a verse in the book of Micha, chapter 7, verse 18, where it says, Mi kel kamocha nosa avon v'avar al pesha l'sherit nachalato. It says Hashem is who is like Hashem, who forgives all kinds of sins and overlooks and doesn't really count some of the sins we do. For who the shirei nachalato, the remainder, the leftovers, basically, of his nachala, of his heritage. So how do you explain this verse? So the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, the rabbis of the Talmud explain, Lemi nosa avon lemisha over al pesha amar Rabbi Acha bar Chanina aleha v'kotzba. Alecha v'kotzba, a beautiful, delicious piece of meat with a thorn in it. In other words, it's a mixed bag. There's pluses and minuses. It's a blessing and a curse. What does that mean? Right? It's l'sherit nachalato, that the remainder of Hashem's heritage, lo l'klal nachalato, not l'chol, not all of the nachala, not all of the remnant, but to the leftovers. Well, what does that mean? So ele lemi she mesim atzmo kisharim, to the people who act like they are the leftovers. There's people who don't step up front and argue and make waves and try to get their own way. People who are okay with saying, this is Hashem's will, and I will submit to it. Who am I to argue? How much do I know that as if I know more than the sages or whatever, right? Or whatever the situation may be. L'chol nitrabta chibat am kadosh sharei gam kan asu atzmam kisharayim v'lo chashu al kavod asmam klal. They don't give themselves airs and honors that they don't deserve. Rather, they admit to the honor that they should be giving to the command of Hashem in this case, Hashem, in this case, said, move back from the Mishkan, and no matter how religious I think I am, I listen. If Hashem were to tell me, sit over there in shul, sit in the back, sit in the middle, or whatever he says, sit on the side, I would submit to that. Hashem is saying it, and that's the praise, that you're listening to what Hashem says, despite what your own desires and self what I'm looking for, your own calculations might lead you to believe. All right, we're skipping ahead, forging ahead towards chapter 3, verse 13. Right, and here we're in the part of the parsha that deals with the counting of the Leviim. The tribe of Levi was counted separate from the other 12 tribes. From the 12 tribes, Hashem said he didn't want them to be counted, and he wanted them to be counted from even a younger age, from a 1 month old, not from 20 years old, because the Leviim had a special duty of working in the Mishkan, helping the Kohanim, etc. So they were immediately given a different kind of treatment, whereas they were counted again, and also they were not going to get land. That's not very relevant now because this is in the Midbar, but eventually it would become relevant. Okay. It says in chapter 3, verse 13. And of course, at this point so far, this work that the Leviim would be doing was originally given to the Bechor, to the firstborn. And it says that Ki li kol Bechor, all firstborns are mine, Hashem is saying. Biyom hakoti kol Bechor be'eretz Mitzrayim, from the time that I killed all the firstborns in the land of Egypt. V'kidashti li kol Bechor b'Yisrael. At that point, all of the firstborns of Israel became holy to me, were given a job. Me'adam v'ad behema, animals and people and animals both, right? Even firstborn donkeys have some sort of significance over other donkeys. All of them lihayu, they're all mine. Ani Hashem, and I am Hashem. And the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, Reb Chaim Ibn Attar, says very simply, he writes this towards the end of chapter 3. His commentary can be found, if you want to find it, is on chapter 3, verse 45. He says, Hakavana b'mamar ani Hashem lomar. Why does it say ani Hashem at the end of this? I am Hashem, right? Lomar she shagam she'amru zal atida avoda shetachzor libechorot. He says, in the future, the rabbis tell us that in the future, that means after Mashiach comes, these Bechorim, these firstborns, they're going to get their job back. Right? The firstborns were supposed to be serving in the temple for the Kohanim, and then they lost that privilege when they were involved in the sin of the golden calf. And the only tribe that was not involved were the Leviim, so they're rewarded by taking the place of these firstborns. But the rabbis tell us in the future, they're going to get their jobs back. Why? Lo yardu ha-Leviim hiyot la-Hashem. But even when that happens, the Leviim are still going to be holy to Hashem. They're still people. They're still special. Even though they're not going to have this exclusive right to work in the Mishkan, they're going to have new co-workers working with them, right? A neighboring office is going to it's going to send some workers into their office, right? So the Levim are going to be working with the firstborns. That doesn't. We're not going to diminish. Hashem's not going to diminish the power of the firstborn. V'hu omru v'hayu li haLevim ani Hashem, and that's what it means. Hashem, when Hashem says "Ani Hashem," I am Hashem. So kishem sheshmi li olam va'ed, just like I am forever. Kamokain, you Halavim, the idea of the Levim being mine, the Levim being holy, and even though the point of the Levim being holy seems to be that they should work in the Mishkan, and they're not going to be working in the Mishkan all alone all the time. Nevertheless, they are going to continue to be holy forever, even when the Bechorim, even when the firstborns get their job back. I bring up this Orach Chaim, because he's quoted by Rav Chaim Kanievsky in Talmud Dekra. On this verse, chapter 3, verse 13, which we just read, that the firstborns are mine, and he says, Tevot li, the words mine, hayu ein muvan sharei lekach mehem habchora, vayikra Rabbah, reish perak bet. So, Vayikra Rabbah, the beginning of chapter 2, Omrim, B'kol Makom, Shenamar Li Enu Zaz Leolam. Whenever the word Li is used, when Hashem uses the word Li, it's mine, Li, right? It's mine. Whenever Hashem says mine, that means it's Leolam. It means it's Hashem's forever. And that makes sense now with the Orach Chaim's comment, right? Lo b'olam hazeh, v'lo b'olam haba. Not in this world, not in the future world. It's going to be forever. Chule. B'bechorot k'tiv ki li kol bechor. As it says, Hashem says about these firstborns that they are His. Hu t'mua k'nurali. But this seems a little bit strange. Why? Why does it say? Remember the kan remez ma'ashikatu b'Orach Chaim hakadosh sof parsha b'shem razal the atid lavo tachzor avoda habchorot. The service is going to come back to them, but that doesn't mean they have it now. So what's the always for these firstborns? In other words, if their job was taken away and given to the Levim even now, right, until Mashiach comes, how could you say that they have their status forever? It was taken away for 2,000 years, 3,000 years. They haven't been doing their job of serving in the temple. That the Levim had that responsibility instead. So how are you going to say that that indeed the firstborns have their status forever minus 3,000, infinity minus 3,000? Is this calculus? What are we doing here? So that's his question. So he has an answer that he's going to quote from his father, the Stipler Gaon, Rav Yisrael Kanievsky. Amar Mori V'Rabbi, my teacher, my father, my Rebbe, Zechet Tzadok Levracha, right? He should be blessed. His memory should be blessed. Heshiv Ulai Kevan She De Temuratan, right? He says that the firstborns were replaced by the Levium. Right? The Levium took the place of these firstborns. But, however, Kiyum al Ki'ilu Schut HaBechora Lo Kala, but they didn't weaken their status. Their greatness of being Levium didn't go away just because they were substituted for a little while. In other words, when a teacher is substituted by, has to go home or is on vacation or who knows what, that doesn't mean he or she isn't the teacher anymore when they come back, when the substitute is done with the job. They were just substituted temporarily, doesn't mean that they lost their job, right? Tumuato kayemet, the exchange makes it so that it's real and forever. Fizeh perush had ita bikinot elitzion v'areha. He explains with this, the Stiplegon explains with this, a particularly difficult line in the song Elitzion that we say on Tisha B'Av. We say Eli zivche tmideha fidyone b'choreha, for the daily sacrifices and for the substitution of the firstborn. Now, the second half of that phrase, that we're mourning the substitution of the firstborn, is difficult. The redeeming the firstborn, whether it's human or donkey, it didn't end. It's still true today. We still have to do Pidyon Haben. We talked about. We had a whole class on this in the Jewish life cycles series that we did before. Free plug. All right. Even the achar chuban, even after the destruction, no pidyon bechor. So pidyon adam, pidyon pater chamor, even the redemption of the firstborn donkey that somebody has beer. So he explains the kai al halavim shepadu et habechorot bimei Moshe. What it means is, he explains, and this is still his father's explanation. We're not saying in that line that we're missing the Pidyon Haben. It sounds like we're saying we're missing the Pidyon Haben. That's not what we miss. What we're missing is the service of the Kohanim and the Leviim, which were still going on. And it's still, that could be the service instead of the Leviim being involved. It could be the service of the Bechoro, of the firstborns. But, Me'ata... Now that the temple has been destroyed, we don't have this to take the place of the firstborns, and that is what we're crying about. We're crying that we don't have the service that should be taking the place of these firstborns. They could be doing it, and nobody's doing it, and that's what we're indeed lamenting in these times. Okay, last piece for today. We're going to be jumping around a little bit to explain a certain interesting phenomenon. Now, we've counted all of the tribes, and there's tribes of different numbers. Obviously, they're not all the same numbers. But what's interesting is that of all the tribes, that it's quite noticeable that one tribe has a lot less than everybody else, right? Ko pekude halavim, says chapter 3, verse 39, right? Ko pekude halavim asher pakad Moshe v'Aaron al pi H-Shem lemishpochatam kol zachar miben chodesh v'mala shneim ve'esrim aleph. He did the math he counted all the Levium from 1 month up, 1 month and up, not just 20 years and up, from 1 month, a whole right? A whole almost 20 years earlier. So we should have, if you would think about it, you should have a whole lot more Levium. But in fact, we have a lot less Levium, and we're counting from a much younger age. We have only 22,000 in total. 22,000 Levium in total. And amongst the different commentaries that deal with this, we'll start with the Ramban, who's going to be quoted by the next commentary anyway. But let's look at the Ramban very quickly inside. Again, we're not starting from the beginning of the essay. We're starting from sort of the middle. And he says, Hine lo hayu shevet Levim kishar hashvatim. The Levim were not like the other tribes. Ki meben chodesh v'mala lo hayu rak asrim v'shnayim elef. Even from 1 month and up, there were only 22,000 of them. Meben shloshim shana kulam shemotam alafim. And from the age of 30 and up until 50, they only had 8,000. This is going to be the what it says in chapter 4, verse 48. If you do the math, you see that like I said, all the other tribes were counted from 20 and up, and they're twice as big as Levi, being counted from a much earlier age. Hadayin lo nasu ha'aron tiyeh kedusha mekala behen, and the Levium weren't. It's not like they were being punished or something like that. It's not like they were dying left and right because they weren't, servicing the Mishkan correctly or something like that. It's unbelievable. So what's going on? So he has two different answers to why the census of the Levium is so much smaller than you would expect. V'ani choshev, I gather, I think, shezeh chizuk lema she'amru rabbeinu zal, that this fits with what the rabbis say in Midrash, in Tanchuma, shivtu shel lo hayu ba'avur melechet Mitzrayim avodat perach. The tribe of Levi, as we know, Paro had respect for the priestly class, and that's what the Levim were at this time. And so he didn't have them work, which is why, for example, Moshe and Aaron were able to go in and out without having to be servants themselves. And what does that have to do with anything? HaKadosh Baruch Hu marbe otem k'neged gzeret Mitzrayim. We say that it's because of the work of Mitzrayim that the other tribes were given a special blessing of more fruitfulness. But if the Levium didn't have that difficulty of working in Mitzrayim like that, so they didn't benefit in the same way as the other tribes to be given that level of blessing. So they weren't as fruitful. So of course there's going to be fewer Levium. They didn't have that miracle happen where septuplets or whatever were born to each of the Jewish mothers because their husbands were working, and so they got a special blessing of that. But if the Levium weren't working like that, if they weren't being enslaved, they weren't tortured and terrorized by the Egyptians, so they did not have that same blessing. That's one. Number two, v'ulai, and perhaps another answer might be that lo haya ze b'kas hazaken alehem. Perhaps it's because their elder did not have anger against them, or because of the anger that their elder had held against them. Who's their elder? Yaakov. Yaakov was upset. Remember, with Shimon and Levi when they attacked the people of Hamor and Shechem, when they went and killed off the whole town for what Hamor did to their sister Dinah. So on his deathbed, Yaakov basically more or less cursed Shimon and Levi for their behavior. That's at least one way to read it. And perhaps that's the curse here, is that their numbers ended up smaller. And therefore they right they had smaller numbers. Now you might ask, what about Shimon? So the Ramban answers that. Ramban points out that later on, when the last census is before the Jewish people enter Eretz Yisrael, chapter 26, verse 14, it does say that they were also reduced before they went into Israel by 22,000. Same number, interestingly enough. I wonder if anybody writes that. 37,300 men. Right, because of the plague of Baal Peor. Of those people who were involved with the plague of Baal Peor, we know that the tribe of Shimon was quite involved in that due to their the whole story with Pinchas, as we'll get to when we get to Parshat Pinchas. Speaking of Parshat Pinchas, In Parshat Pinchas, there's that other accounting as we just heard about. And over there, the Meshech Chachma has a comment on why the tribe of Levi is so small. And it's a completely different idea, worthy of our attention. So Meshech Chachma, writing about, let's say about 100 years ago or so, he writes, so we just had the Ramban writing, he was writing about 900 years ago. So now we're fast forwarding to only 100 years ago. All right, so he says, Hayu Pekudehem Shlosha Ve'esrim Elef Kol Zachar Meben Chodesh V'Mala Lo Kedu B'toch B'nei Yisrael Ki Lo Natan Lahem Nachala L'toch B'nei Yisrael Kadmonim Niflo Madua Shevet Levi Hayu Ma'ad Misifro Keneged Shari B'Shvatim Shari B'Shvatim. So he says the older commentaries, meaning of course meaning here, of course, this particular commentary. Right? So, so the Meshech Chachma quotes this older commentary, which is the Ramban, right? So, wondering why the tribe of Levi is so small, considering all that we've discussed about it. So, he says, one second. Oh, that's weird. Excuse me. All right. So he says that he gives a completely different answer. Let's see. Rashi Hevi Mina Yishalmi Ulam. Ladati yitaken ki lo nitchanu alilut shayu tzufa umabit kishevet levi legion shel melech lo yinchalu nachala, because the tribe of Levi did not acquire their own land, did not inherit land. They lived under the auspices of the king. Right? They had to live. They subsisted from handouts. Rak are migrash b'toch b'nei Yisrael. Their land was. They were given their own cities. Right? V'im b'nei Levi yu rabim b'mispar. If there would have been a lot of them, halo yitzaku madua nikra chelkam. They would just overpower. They would outnumber everybody. V'gam al b'nei Yisrael haya kaved adavar lekalkel im gadol kemohu. V'hasher matzanu b'nei Yosef shitzaku. They would have reason to complain that they just can't support this giant priestly class. Ki Hashem birkam b'amrav. If Hashem would have blessed them to have a lot of people, but makom tzar lahem l'shavet, and not enough room for them to live. L'chein hayu mechakmim habore levlib rabot otam al dehanesiya. Hashem didn't give them that miracle of huge growth because Hashem wanted for them to be able to do their job of living amongst the Jewish people in cities that were nearby, all around Israel, and not just in any particular area. He wanted their influence everywhere. And for their influence to be everywhere, he needed for the tribe of Levi to have the kind of numbers where they indeed would be able to subsist and live and inspire all the Jewish people wherever they lived. And that's a completely different reason, but also a beautiful reason, and fits very nicely historically with why the people of Levi were much smaller in terms of their numbers, but doesn't take away from their greatness. Sometimes, as they say in art, sometimes less is more, and it's a beautiful thing that all of this kind of fits together in a way so that the Jewish people were able to support the tribe of Levi and not complain about it and not be upset about them. And it's when these groups are too large that the people sometimes complain about them, rebel against them, and that would be terrible for the Jewish people and for our history. All right, and that's some Torah we can learn, even though it's not Shavuot yet, but nevertheless we should be learning Torah all the time, not just in the holiday of Shavuot. But there's lessons here about the power of Torah and the importance of influence and the power of humility to acquire Torah and the power of Torah to teach us how to do mitzvot correctly, all relevant to the holiday of Shavuot coming up. And our learning today should be a schut for Chaya Bat Chana. She should be everything should go smoothly today and in the future. All right, thank you for listening. I'm going to stop the share to Facebook. If you have any questions, you can share them now or ask them on the YouTube page.